Hey, story lovers. Get ready for the captivating tale, Snowdrift Sweethearts. Before we dive in, a massive thank you to my first 12 amazing subscribers. If you haven't already, please humbly support the channel by hitting subscribe, like, comment, and share. The leather interior of the black Mercedes S-Class smelled faintly of expensive cologne and the tension that perpetually clung to Luke Harrington. At 35, Luke was a name synonymous with ruthless efficiency, the youngest partner at one of Chicago's most prestigious defense firms, known for saving pharmaceutical giants and hedge fund managers from their own hubris. Yet the only case he couldn't seem to win was the one against his own life. He glanced at the flawless stainless steel watch that cost more than his driver made in a year. 4:30 p.m., December 23rd. He was precisely on schedule. The private jet had landed in Denver exactly as planned. The sleek, black sedan was currently eating up the miles toward Aspen, where the Harrington dynasty awaited. Luke's Christmas was not a holiday. It was a mandatory annual performance. His father, Judge Arthur Harrington, a man whose approval was as brittle and sharp as crystal, demanded perfect attendance at the annual gathering at the family's estate on the Marone Creek Club golf course. It was a week of calibrated small talk, strategic networking, and the subtle, constant pressure to find a suitable, equally high-powered fiancé. This year, the pressure was particularly acute, given his recent and thoroughly vetted promotion. "Are you certain we shouldn't attempt the northern route, Mr. Harrington?" The driver, a muscular man named Ken, spoke with the guarded respect reserved for high-paying clients. Luke frowned, adjusting the crisp cuff of his bespoke suit jacket. "The northern route adds 40 minutes, Ken. We maintain the original plan. We have excellent tires and four-wheel drive. We will be fine." The air, however, disagreed. It was too quiet, too thick. The sky, which had been clear, high blue over Denver, had curdled into a heavy, bruised violet. The wind, which had been merely a whistle on the plains, now roared through the high mountain passes, shaking the large vehicle. They were deep in the Rockies now, past the points of no return, heading into the belly of a forecasted but underestimated snowstorm. Luke pulled out his phone. No signal. Of course. The moment he needed to confirm his arrival time to smooth the ruffled feathers of his mother, Eleanor, who meticulously planned every second of the Harrington Christmas agenda, the technology failed him. He sighed. The sound, a low, almost painful exhalation of stress. He had left a major M&A deal in the hands of his junior associates and had promised his family again that his focus would be absolute. He was already thinking of the complex documents waiting for him in his briefcase. Work was safe. Work was predictable. Family, not so much. Just get through the next few miles, he thought, gripping the armrest. Then it's the usual charade, brandy, the annual argument about politics, and the superficial exchange of gifts. It's only 5 days. Suddenly, the vehicle lurched violently. Ken cursed under his breath, wrenching the wheel. A massive, snow-laden pine tree had succumbed to the heavy, wet snow and wind, crashing across the two-lane mountain highway with the sound of splintering timber and shattering glass. The Mercedes stopped inches short of the trunk. "That's the route blocked, sir," Ken said, his voice grim. "And judging by the way that snow is falling and that wind, nobody is getting up here to clear it for hours, maybe days." Luke stared at the impenetrable white wall of the storm outside the window, the flakes now the size of quarters, assaulting the windshield. His meticulously planned journey, his perfect schedule, his expected arrival had just been rendered obsolete by a random act of nature. Defiance in its purest form had arrived as a blizzard. "We have to turn around," Luke said, his voice flat with suppressed panic. "Find a detour. We cannot sit here." Ken shook his head slowly. "Sir, with respect, there's no turning around. The road is too narrow, the shoulder is non-existent, and visibility is zero. If we try to back up, we risk sliding off the cliff on the other side. We have to keep going forward, sir, or wait for the authorities. But wait, there is a narrow, unpaved road about a mile ahead. It leads to a town. Harmony Creek, I think they call it. It's barely a pinprick on the map, but it's the only immediate shelter. Luke looked at the name. Harmony Creek. The name alone sounded like a rejection of everything he was. It wasn't on the way to Aspen. It wasn't elite, rigid, or predictable. It was a deviation, an unplanned variable. Take it, Luke commanded. The word eclipsed resignation. His Christmas performance was officially canceled, replaced by a terrifying blank canvas. The pressure cooker of his perfect life had just sprung a leak, and the steam was escaping into a place utterly unknown to him. The only thing Luke knew for sure was that his father would not be amused. And for the first time in years, Luke felt a curious, albeit terrified, flutter of freedom beneath his tailored wool coat. The snow was falling harder, erasing the road behind them, forcing him toward a destiny he hadn't chosen, but that might, just might, choose him. The thought of avoiding the mandatory family luncheon was almost enough to distract him from the impending doom. Almost. The detour was less a road than more a suggestion. It was a single, snow-covered track winding precariously through the towering pines. Every rotation of the wheels was a small, desperate prayer against the slick, icy surface. After what felt like an eternity, the pines grudgingly gave way and a cluster of lights, warm and inviting, materialized through the thick, white curtain of the storm. Harmony Creek was exactly as Ken had described, a pinprick, a single main street lined with buildings that looked like they'd been built by hand from old lumber and good intentions. A small, glowing sign, barely visible beneath a cornice of snow, announced the Hearthside B&B. Luke ordered Ken to pull up, the sleek, black car looking like an intruder from another planet. He grabbed his designer briefcase and his small carry-on, the cashmere of his scarf already damp from the swirling snow. "Stay with the car, Ken. Try the satellite phone. I'll secure shelter." Luke stepped out into the storm, and the cold was a physical shock. Not the sterile, dry chill of Aspen, but a raw, deep, bone-aching dampness. He felt utterly exposed, utterly ridiculous, standing on a porch made of rough-hewn cedar. His three-piece suit, an armor that suddenly felt flimsy and theatrical. He knocked on the heavy wooden door. The sound was swallowed instantly by the blizzard. Before he could knock again, the door swung inward and his world tilted on its axis. The woman standing in the doorway was a riot of color and warmth. She wore a thick, hand-knitted emerald green sweater that looked perfectly mismatched with a pair of faded jeans and bright red wool socks peeking out from under ankle boots. Her hair, the color of rich, dark mahogany, was pulled back loosely, a few stray curls escaping to frame a face dusted with flour, giving her an unexpected, appealing smudge of innocence. Her eyes, a startling, lively hazel, widened in surprise. She was definitely not an Aspen hostess. Her smile was wide, genuine, and instantly unsettling to a man who specialized in reading guarded expressions. "Well, hello there. You must be a very determined lost soul," she said, her voice like warm honey laced with mountain air, clear and welcoming. "Come in quickly, or the snow will take the whole kitchen." Luke, still reeling from the abrupt transition from corporate jet-setter to stranded supplicant, stepped inside. The warmth hit him immediately, a glorious wave of cinnamon, wood smoke, and something sweet, gingerbread, perhaps. "Luke Harrington," he introduced himself, extending a hand that felt cold and awkward. She took his hand, her touch surprisingly firm and warm, utterly devoid of the grasping reverence he usually encountered. She didn't recognize his name, a fact that was both deeply irritating and strangely relieving. "Zoe Miller, and you've found the Hearthside B&B," she said, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips as she took in his impeccably tailored suit and his frantic energy. We always have room for travelers stranded by a Harmony Creek blizzard. It's kind of our specialty. The snow really comes down to prove a point this time of year. She pointed toward a cozy, glowing fire. Toss your things by the fire. We'll get you sorted with a room and maybe a mug of something hot. You look like you need it, Mr. Harrington. You look like you just lost $1 million case and forgot to eat breakfast. He could only stare. He was accustomed to deference, to people anticipating his needs before they voiced them. This woman, Zoe, was assessing him with the casual frankness of a sister. She was chaos and comfort wrapped in one bright package, and she had just casually dismantled his professional facade with a single accurate sentence. He was trapped, utterly out of his element, and suddenly completely captivated. The defiance was real. This was going to be the longest, most unpredictable Christmas of his life. His elite, rigid world had collided head-on with a quirky B&B in a town called Harmony Creek. He wasn't sure if he'd just found salvation or a profound new kind of trouble. The former seemed impossible, the latter inevitable. He watched her turn back toward a counter laden with cooling pastries, the light of the fire illuminating the flower on her cheek. The air outside howled a ferocious agreement. He was staying, and in the oppressive silence of his forced stop, Luke Harrington could almost hear the faint, dangerous whisper of his own heart beating a rhythm entirely off schedule. He placed his expensive leather briefcase with its volatile documents right next to the worn, oversized teddy bear sitting innocently by the hearth. The juxtaposition felt prophetic. Chapter 2. The small, polished brass bell above the Hearthside B&B's counter tinkled merrily as Zoe Miller moved, a light, energetic sound utterly at odds with the deafening roar of the blizzard outside. Luke stood, mesmerized less by the storm and more by the sheer amount of warmth radiating from the small space. It wasn't just the huge stone fireplace where logs crackled with generous enthusiasm. It was the atmosphere. Every surface was rich with color. Quilted throws draped over plush armchairs, mismatched but comfortable sofas, shelves overloaded with well-loved books, and the constant, comforting aroma of baked goods and spiced cider. It was a domesticity Luke had only ever seen stylized in magazine spreads, never lived in and breathing like this. He had been momentarily rendered speechless, a truly rare condition for a man paid hundreds of dollars an hour for his ability to talk. Zoe was now wiping her hands on a festive apron that looked like it was made from an old Christmas quilt. "You're in luck, Mr. Harrington," she said, retrieving a large ceramic mug from beneath the counter. "I just finished a batch of my emergency blizzard brew. It's mostly cinnamon and good cheer, but I promised it's strong enough to thaw a polar bear." She filled the mug from a bubbling pot on a nearby stovetop, the steam rising in a fragrant cloud. Luke took it, his gloved fingers instantly grateful for the heat. He stripped off the gloves, stuffing them into his coat pocket. "The name is Luke, please," he managed, taking a careful sip. The brew was sweet, but the spices were complex, a vibrant, unexpected flavor profile that, like everything else about this place, demanded his attention. Zoe leaned her elbows on the counter, her eyes twinkling. "Unexpected is what Harmony Creek does best, Luke. You planned for Aspen, and the mountain said, 'Not today, fancy man. Today, you get real snow and real people.' How many are you? Just you and your driver?" "Just the two of us. Ken is waiting in the car, attempting to re-establish communications. I told him to try the satellite phone, though I suspect the interference from the heavy snow is too great." He felt the need to explain their professionalism, their preparation, the sheer impossibility of their current predicament. Zoe merely chuckled, a deep, melodious sound that seemed to chase away the last vestiges of Luke's Chicago stress. "Satellite phone? Oh, bless your heart. You're adorable. Honey, in a blizzard like this, you're lucky if you can still hear the town siren. Harmony Creek likes its peace. Tell your driver to come in. There's a cozy pull-out sofa in the lounge he can crash on, and I'll find him some dry socks. Nobody waits in the car during a proper snow event." He hesitated. "He's an employee, Zoe. He's obligated to maintain watch over the vehicle and the contents." "He's a human being, Luke, and he's freezing." Zoe interjected, her tone gentle but firm, instantly cutting through his corporate hierarchy. She didn't wait for his response. "I'll get him. Don't move. Finish your brew. I'll be right back." She grabbed a thick plaid coat and a pair of industrial-strength mittens, and before Luke could protest, she was out the door, battling the wind and snow with a casual ease that suggested she was merely strolling to the mailbox. Luke watched through the frosted glass as she cheerfully waved Ken toward the front door, shouting something only the wind could hear. Ken, the stoic professional, actually cracked a small smile before hurrying inside. Luke was left alone in the parlor, the silence punctuated only by the crackling fire and the muffled roar of the wind. He sank onto a plush, overstuffed chair upholstered in a warm cranberry color. He realized his shoulders had relaxed for the first time in days. The pressure he carried, the invisible weight of expectation, had nowhere to land here. The B&B didn't care about his net worth, his client list, or his father's approval. It only cared that he was cold and needed a safe place to land. As if on cue, a small girl, no older than 8, with pigtails the color of spun copper and the same startling hazel eyes as Zoe, appeared from a hallway, dragging a massive, antique wooden sled. She stopped short when she saw Luke, her eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Hi," she whispered, clutching a well-worn stuffed reindeer. "Hello," I replied, surprised. He wasn't particularly good with children. They were unpredictable and prone to bursts of enthusiasm that Luke found taxing. "Are you the new snow guest?" she asked, tilting her head. "I believe so. I'm Luke." "I'm Lily," she announced proudly, "and this is Rudolph." She held up the stuffed reindeer. "Mom says Rudolph needs to practice steering the sled because we have to deliver all the Christmas pies to Mrs. Henderson tomorrow, even if the storm is bad. Are you a pie delivery expert?" Luke almost choked on his cider. "No, Lily, I am a lawyer. I deliver legal documents." Lily's face fell. "Oh, that sounds boring." "It can be," Luke admitted, a genuine smile finally touching his lips. He hadn't admitted that to anyone in years. Before he could elaborate, Zoe returned, stomping the snow off her boots. Ken, looking visibly relieved and already shedding layers, followed her. "Lily, sweetie, this is Luke. Luke, this is my CEO, Lily Miller," Zoe joked, ruffling the girl's hair. "Lily, go show Mr. Luke where the house shoes are. His fancy leather loafers are going to take hours to dry." Lily, suddenly emboldened by her mother's presence, took Luke's hand and led him toward a cubby overflowing with various sizes and colors of knitted slippers. Luke, the high-powered corporate titan, found himself kneeling on a braided rug, exchanging his Italian leather shoes for a pair of enormous, slightly fuzzy, hand-knitted navy slippers. "These are great, Lily," Luke said, standing up. They were ridiculously comfortable and entirely beneath his professional dignity. He felt a further, subtle peeling away of his sophisticated armor. Zoe had already assigned Ken to the small lounge, offering him tea and a thick blanket. She turned her attention back to Luke, retrieving a heavy antique pea from a board behind the counter. "All right, Luke, you're in the Evergreen Suite. It's a bit small, but it has a lovely window seat overlooking the creek. And the bed is heaven, I promise. Second floor, last door on the left. The water is hot, but the Wi-Fi, don't even try. This isn't Aspen. Remember, Harmony Creek runs on community, not connectivity." She handed him the key. Her fingers brushed his, and the casual contact sent a completely unexpected, low-voltage jolt through him. Luke quickly pulled his hand away, clutching the key. The sheer intimacy of this small place was overwhelming. He was a man who lived in sterile, soundproof skyscrapers, not cozy B&Bs where his hand could accidentally touch the owners. "I appreciate this, Zoe," he said, trying to sound formal and distant, attempting to rebuild the walls the slippers had dismantled. Zoe laughed again, a sound that Luke was beginning to realize was as essential to the B&B as the fire itself. "Honey, it's Christmas, and you're stranded. The cost is, don't track mud on my clean rug, and if you see a stray gingerbread man, don't eat it before Lily gets to it. We'll settle up when the snow stops and you can actually leave." She softened her tone, recognizing the anxiety beneath his professional demands. "Relax, Luke. You're safe here. Now, go thaw out. Dinner is at 7 sharp. And trust me, you don't want to be late for my meatloaf." Luke nodded, feeling utterly defeated by her casual generosity. He picked up his briefcase, the weight of the documents inside suddenly feeling heavy and foolish. As he climbed the worn, carpeted stairs, he could hear Zoe and Lily already back in the kitchen, the soft, low murmur of their voices mixed with the sounds of spoons clattering and laughter. He paused on the landing, looking down at the small, perfect tableau of mother and daughter surrounded by firelight and snow. He, Luke Harrington, was supposed to be in a 12,000 square foot mansion discussing market liquidity and portfolio performance with people who barely registered his existence outside of their networking value. Instead, he was standing in a hallway, wearing fuzzy blue slippers, his entire life on hold, heading into an evergreen suite run by a woman whose warmth threatened to melt the carefully constructed ice around his heart. He felt a curious blend of dread and anticipation. This was the defiance, the accidental freedom he hadn't known he craved. And it looked a lot like a small town, a fuzzy reindeer, and a quirky single mother named Zoe. He turned the key, and the quiet comfort of the evergreen suite wrapped around him like a hug. He was definitely staying, and the thought of the meatloaf dinner was, shamefully, more exciting than any state dinner he had ever attended. He set his briefcase on the floor. For now, the legal documents could wait. Harmony Creek had him snowbound and surrendered. Chapter 3. Luke woke up the next morning, Christmas Eve, to the silence of deep snow. It was a silence so profound it felt like a physical absence of sound. The window of the evergreen suite was a hazy rectangle of white, and the promised creek view was completely obscured by drifts that had piled up overnight. He checked his phone immediately. No service. He tried his laptop. No connection. The isolation was absolute. His usual routine, checking global markets, reviewing the overnight wire reports, fielding calls from London, was impossible. For a man whose self-worth was intrinsically tied to his productivity, this forced stillness was akin to torture. He dressed in the only non-suit clothing he had, an expensive but stiff pair of dark denim jeans and a navy cashmere sweater. He looked like an advertisement for a luxury lifestyle that was now completely irrelevant. He descended the stairs, finding the main parlor even more inviting in the daylight. The fire was already roaring, and the scent was now a mix of fresh coffee, sizzling bacon, and maple syrup. Ken was already seated at a long, communal dining table, looking far more relaxed than Luke had ever seen him. "Good morning, sir," Ken greeted, standing abruptly. "Sit down, Ken. Just Luke, please." Luke sighed, trying to manage the inherent formality that followed him everywhere. "Any luck with the car radio or the satellite phone?" "None, sir. The snow is too thick. I managed to speak to a local sheriff who drove by on a snowmobile. He confirmed that the highway is shut down indefinitely. He expects it to take at least 3 days, maybe 4, to clear the pass. He called this storm the Grinch of '95, apparently the worst they've seen in decades. 3 days. 3 days of silence, 3 days of missed meetings, 3 days of his father's controlled fury slowly simmering in Aspen. He felt the familiar cold knot tightening in his stomach. He was a professional, an elite problem solver, and he was utterly, helplessly trapped. Zoe materialized from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron again. This one was bright red with little embroidered reindeer. She carried a platter of perfectly cooked eggs and bacon. "Good morning, gentlemen. Lily and I are on coffee and pancake duty," she announced brightly. "Help yourselves." "Luke, you look entirely too stressed for a man wearing fuzzy slippers. Did you try to check your non-existent stocks?" "I was merely confirming the duration of our unexpected stay. I need to secure a rental car that can navigate the back roads, or arrange for a helicopter charter. Can you direct me to the nearest town with a functional airport or a reliable garage?" Zoe poured him a mug of strong, dark coffee, her expression softening. "Luke, the nearest functional airport is 80 miles away, and the roads leading there are as closed as this one. As for a helicopter, the pilots can't see their own hands, let alone a landing pad. You're not going anywhere. Harmony Creek has you on lockdown. Embrace the stasis." He bristled. "I appreciate your hospitality, Zoe, but I have obligations, significant obligations. I am a partner in a major firm, and my failure to attend a mandatory family event will have consequences." "Consequences, huh?" She leaned closer, resting her forearms on the back of a chair. "So you're saying that if you don't show up in Aspen, the world stops spinning, or a judge will take away your ability to make coffee? Come on, Luke. You're a lawyer. You solve problems. Right now, your only problem is the weather, and you can't argue with a blizzard." Her directness was infuriating because it was true. He had nowhere to direct his formidable energy. He was a weapon designed for high-stakes conflict, and he was currently disarmed by pancakes. "The consequence is that I disappoint my family, that I fail to meet an expectation," Luke admitted, the words tasting like bitter herbs in his mouth. Zoe looked at him then, her gaze surprisingly astute, seeing past the custom-tailored cashmere to the exhausted man underneath. "Oh, honey, that's a different kind of obligation entirely. That's not legal, that's emotional, and that's the kind of thing the mountains have a tendency to force you to look at." The morning progressed with Luke pacing the small parlor, attempting to find a single bar of service by holding his phone near a window or above his head, gestures of desperation that Zoe and Lily found endlessly entertaining. "Mummy, look," Lily giggled, holding up a small hand-painted wooden sign. "Luke is doing the signal dance again." "Lily!" Zoe admonished gently, though her eyes were crinkling with amusement. "Mr. Harrington, Luke, has important calls to make." "It's all right, Lily," Luke sighed, lowering his arm. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, which was now threatening to fall out of place. "The dance has failed." Zoe approached him, holding out a plate with a stack of golden buttermilk pancakes drizzled with maple syrup. "Try a distraction. These are famous. They're called Harmony Flapjacks. You can't worry about corporate law when your mouth is full of these." Luke took the plate reluctantly. He wasn't accustomed to eating breakfast, let alone a plate of fluffy, sugary comfort food. He cut a small piece and tasted it. It was, surprisingly, incredible. Rich, light, and authentically homemade. "They're excellent," he conceded. "High praise from the big city lawyer," Zoe teased, but her eyes held genuine pleasure. "So, Luke, since you're officially part of the Harmony Creek Snow Committee now, you should probably know about the crisis." Luke immediately straightened. Crisis. What is it? A medical emergency? Do you need a signed affidavit? A notarized deposition? Zoe laughed heartily. No, nothing quite that dramatic. It's the gingerbread house competition. Luke blinked. The what? The annual gingerbread house competition is tomorrow, Christmas Day, at the community hall. It's the biggest event of the year. This year, the winner gets free B&B membership for a whole year. Big deal. But the storm has caused a problem. The delivery truck carrying the bulk sugar, specialty frosting bags, and, most importantly, the new industrial-strength glue gun needed for Mrs. Gable's notoriously unstable roof design is stuck on the highway, with you. And your point is? Luke asked, trying to find the legal angle. My point is that the whole town is operating on low-grade powdered sugar and sheer willpower. We need something to occupy Mrs. Henderson's aggressive competitive streak while we wait. Since you're trapped here, I'm volunteering you for the Luke Harrington Distinguished Interruption and Snow Removal Expert position. We need help clearing the B&B sidewalk, the one that Ken is currently blocking with the Mercedes, so the neighbors can drop off their emergency pie supplies. Luke stared at the shovel Zoe held out to him. It was a rustic, wooden-handled tool, not an ergonomic piece of carbon fiber. Zoe, I haven't shoveled snow since I was 10, and I wear a suit to work. Well, now you're wearing a very expensive sweater and fuzzy slippers, she pointed out, her expression a mix of challenge and kindness. It'll be good for you. You need to breathe real air, Luke, not the recycled, air-conditioned kind. Come on, a little manual labor is just what a high-powered, high-strung lawyer needs to burn off that Aspen anxiety. Luke looked at the heavy shovel, then at the enormous drifts outside, then at Zoe's encouraging, expectant face. It was utterly ridiculous. He was supposed to be discussing tax shelters, not shoveling snow. But the alternative was pacing the floor and staring at a defunct phone. All right, he sighed, taking the shovel, his hands immediately uncomfortable on the rough wood. But if I slip and sue you, I want 10% off my bill. Zoe grinned, a dazzling, genuine flash of pleasure. Deal. Now, let's see what that big, firm muscle is actually good for, counselor. She handed him an old, heavy canvas coat that smelled faintly of cinnamon and wood smoke. As he slipped it on, the rough texture felt grounding, replacing the slick smoothness of his own wardrobe. He felt less like Luke Harrington, partner, and more like Luke Harrington, laborer. It was humbling, exhausting, and, in a strange, terrifying way, invigorating. He followed Zoe outside into the white chaos, the sound of his breath catching in the icy air. He gripped the shovel, ready to engage in the most pointless, non-billable activity of his entire adult life. He was officially on Harmony Creek time, and his carefully constructed world was already beginning to thaw under Zoe Miller's relentless, genuine warmth. He had a feeling that the hardest thing he would have to shovel out was not the snow, but the emotional debris of his own guarded life. The sheer physical effort of shoveling snow was a revelation to Luke. His body, typically confined to the leather seats of boardrooms and the sanitized air of high-end gyms, rebelled immediately. The first 5 minutes were a chaotic ballet of grunts and clumsy swings. He was moving the dense, heavy snow with all the finesse of a startled moose. Zoe, meanwhile, was a study in graceful efficiency. Dressed in thick, waterproof gear, she moved with an economy of effort, her breath puffing in the crisp air like small, white flags. She noticed his struggle and stopped, leaning against her shovel. "You're using too much back, Luke. You're trying to lift the mountain," she instructed kindly. "Think of it like a push, not a press. Keep the blade low, use your legs. The mountains won't move for you. You have to work with them." Luke gritted his teeth. sweat plastering his cashmere sweater to his back. "I'm accustomed to moving much larger assets with a simple signature, Zoe. This feels unnecessarily archaic." "Well, welcome to the ancient art of the necessary," she quipped, demonstrating a perfect low scoop and side toss. "See? It's meditation through effort. It's about being present. You can't be arguing with a hostile witness when you're trying not to slip on the ice." He tried her technique. Push, low, use the legs. The third push was marginally better. The fifth was almost competent. He focused entirely on the task, and slowly, blessedly, the intellectual, relentless chatter that usually occupied his mind, case law, precedents, arguments, began to quiet. He was reduced to his physicality, to the simple, satisfying rhythm of steel against wood. An hour later, they had carved a respectable path from the B&B door to the small wooden fence. Luke was exhausted, his hands blistered, but he felt an odd, unfamiliar sense of accomplishment that a billion-dollar merger had never provided. As they stood catching their breath, a stout woman with cheeks rosy from the cold, bundled in a parka and carrying a huge wicker basket, carefully navigated the newly cleared path. "Zoe, dear, you are a lifesaver. I managed to bake the apricot turnovers, but my driveway is impassable," the woman announced. She paused, catching sight of Luke, whose face was flushed and whose expensive clothes were dusted with snow and pine needles. "Well, hello there, stranger. You must be one of Zoe's unexpected guests. Did you help with this heroic clearing?" "I'm Luke Harrington, and yes, I provided the necessary manual labor." "Luke is a very fancy lawyer from the city, Mrs. Gable," Zoe said, a mischievous twinkle in her eye. "A lawyer? Oh, heavens," Mrs. Gable exclaimed, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Zoe, you didn't tell him about the boundary dispute yet, did you?" Zoe shot Luke an apologetic look. "It was next on the agenda, Mrs. Gable, right after learn to shovel." Mrs. Gable launched it into a detailed, passionately articulated explanation of a feud between her and her neighbor, Mr. Finch, about the precise placement of a new garden gnome and an aging rhododendron bush, which they both claimed marked the official property line. The dispute had escalated from passive-aggressive gardening to threatening letters written in calligraphy. Luke, despite himself, listened intently. The entire conflict was trivial, but the passion behind it was palpable and real. He was used to disputes over millions, but this gnome war was about dignity and ownership in a small corner of the world. When Mrs. Gable finished, Luke found himself automatically analyzing the situation. "Do you have any documented agreement from the land registry or any photographs of the boundary prior to the gnome's installation?" Mrs. Gable blinked, stunned. "Well, no, dear. Just 30 years of customary knowledge and a handshake agreement from my late husband. We don't much like paperwork in Harmony Creek." "But, Mrs. Gable, if the original agreement was a handshake, then the key is custom and intent. If you can prove historical usage, where you traditionally mowed or where the sprinklers were always placed, that establishes intent. The gnome is merely a symbol. You need to focus on precedent, not the statue itself." Mrs. Gable's mouth dropped open. "Precedent? Of course! I have photos of the annual church picnic where the kids always played just to the right of that bush. That proves it. Oh, Luke, you're a genius. Why didn't I think of a precedent?" "He deals with this kind of thing all the time, Mrs. Gable, just usually involving corporate hostile takeovers instead of hostile garden decor." Luke felt a familiar rush of satisfaction. It was a victory. Small, silly, and utterly without financial reward, but it was a true application of his skill. He had solved a problem for the community. That evening, after a surprisingly delicious and unpretentious meatloaf dinner that he and Ken ate with gusto, Luke found Zoe sitting by the fire, mending one of Lily's mittens. Ken had already retreated to his lounge sofa, exhausted by the day's activities and the sheer amount of food. Luke, sipping another mug of the emergency blizzard brew, sat opposite her. The quiet intimacy of the moment was thick, like the snow outside. "Thank you," Luke said genuinely, "for the shoveling, and for the coat, and the meatloaf." "You're welcome. And you're welcome for the gnome advice," Zoe replied, not looking up from her stitching. "You looked genuinely happy helping Mrs. Gable. You should try solving property disputes more often. It suits you better than saving corrupt CEOs. Luke sighed, running a hand over the back of his neck. "Those corrupt CEOs are my career, Zoe. They afford me the life I have. It's stable, it's lucrative, and it meets the criteria set by my family. It's not about happiness, it's about achievement." Zoe finally looked up, her expression a gentle challenge. "And is it achieving what you truly want?" The question hung in the air, sharp and unanswerable. He looked away, staring into the flickering flames. "What I want is irrelevant. My father is a judge. My family legacy is built on law and order, on being the best, the most respected, the most powerful. My life is mapped out. Christmas in Aspen is not just a holiday, it's a statement. It's where business is discussed, alliances are formed, and my path is confirmed." He paused, feeling the need to explain the suffocating weight of his expectations. "If I miss this, if I deviate, it's not just a missed dinner. It's perceived as a weakness, a lack of commitment. It's a failure to uphold the Harrington standard. I've spent my entire life building that shield." Zoe dropped the mitten and needle into her lap, her hazel eyes holding his. "Luke, the only person holding you to that standard is you, and maybe your father. But I guarantee you, if you were in Aspen right now, you wouldn't be talking about precedent and intent with Mrs. Gable. You'd be talking about tax law and stock options, and you wouldn't have that genuinely tired, genuinely satisfied look on your face." She picked up the mitten again, her voice soft. "I ended up here because I got tired of chasing a version of success that wasn't mine. I used to work in marketing in the city. Big job, big salary, tiny soul. I came here on a whim, on a holiday, and realized that my life was full of things I didn't love, trying to impress people who didn't actually see me. So I stopped. I bought this place, I simplified, and I learned how to make pancakes. And Lily and I are thriving. That's my achievement." Luke listened, utterly disarmed. Her story was a mirror image of his own dissatisfaction, but her choice was the one he was too terrified to make. He was still climbing a ladder he didn't want, held captive by the fear of disappointing a man he now realized he no longer respected. "But what about security? What about the future?" Luke asked, the lawyer in him demanding proof. Zoe smiled, a slow, radiant light that filled the room more than the fire. "Security, Luke, is knowing you can fix something when it breaks. It's having a community that brings you pie when you're snowed in. It's not a number in a bank account. And the future? The future is whatever you decide to put your hands to, be it shoveling snow or knitting a mitten. It just can't be something you do out of fear." Luke looked at his bruised hands, then at her gentle, wise face. He had come here trying to escape the snow, but he was slowly realizing that Zoe Miller was forcing him to face the blizzard that was his own life. He had never felt so vulnerable, so seen, and so close to the possibility of a different kind of warmth. He knew, instinctively, that this conversation was more important than any legal brief in his briefcase. Chapter 5. The following morning, Christmas Eve morning, dawned with a deceptively cheerful sun filtering weakly through the clouds, illuminating a world encased in crystalline white. The snow had stopped, but the drifts were monolithic, confirming Zoe's assessment that they were stranded for the foreseeable future. Luke spent the early hours doing exactly what he had sworn he would not do, attempting to work. He spread out the complex documents from his briefcase on the small writing desk in the Evergreen suite. They were detailed analyses of a competitor's vulnerability in a proposed merger, a high-stakes game of corporate chess. He managed to read 3 pages before the silence of the room, punctuated only by the occasional creak of old wood, became unbearable. His thoughts kept drifting back to property lines, garden gnomes, and the scent of gingerbread. "Focus, Harrington," he commanded himself, forcing his eyes back to the dense legal jargon. "This is who you are. This is your value." He descended to the kitchen mid-morning, drawn by the smell of something savory and the sound of Lily's enthusiastic humming. Zoe was standing over a massive iron pot, stirring something thick and reddish-brown. "Breakfast was delicious," Luke offered, "and thank you for not pressing the issue of the shovel again." "It's Christmas Eve, Luke," Zoe said, smiling over her shoulder. "Today is about pot stirring, not shoveling. I'm making chili for the community potluck tonight. It's our annual blizzard relief party. Since we can't get all home, we all gather here." "A relief party for a blizzard? That seems counterintuitive," Luke observed, leaning against the doorframe. "It's Harmony Creek logic. You can't beat the snow, so you invite it in for a bowl of chili. We're all trapped, so we might as well be trapped together." He watched her work. She was graceful, focused, and completely at ease in the chaos of her small kitchen. He realized he was captivated by her simplicity, a stark contrast to the performative complexity of his own life. "Zoe," Luke began hesitantly, "about the B&B. It's charming. How long have you been running it?" "About 5 years now," she replied, her voice remaining steady, but her posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "It was a challenge at first. A lot of renovations, a lot of learning on the fly. Lily and I are a good team, though." Just as she finished, a sudden, loud crackle of static erupted from the old wooden radio sitting on a shelf. A deep, gravelly voice cut through the noise. "And I repeat, due to the closure of the main highway and the extent of the snowdrifts, all commercial activity in Harmony Creek is effectively halted until at least the 27th. And a special note to all our small business owners, that includes the final payment deadline for the end-of-year county taxes. The deadline remains midnight December 24th, folks. No extensions, so make sure those payments are already processed." Zoe's spoon clattered against the side of the pot. Her easy, cheerful demeanor vanished, replaced by a flash of genuine, cold fear that made Luke's professional instincts flare immediately. "Zoe, what is it?" She quickly turned off the radio, her back to him. "Nothing, just the usual small-town bureaucracy. They love their deadlines." "That wasn't nothing. That was a tax deadline, and the delivery truck is stuck. Are you saying you can't process the payment without access to the outside world, or physical access to the city?" Luke pressed, sensing a dangerous fragility beneath her cheerful surface. Zoe turned, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Look, Luke, it's fine. It's just a clerical issue. The B&B, like any small seasonal business, can be tight. I've been waiting for a wire transfer from a large booking group, a last-minute corporate retreat that canceled at the last minute. The check is with my accountant in Denver, and I was going to collect it after Christmas. I was counting on that deposit to cover this tax payment." "So you don't have the cash on hand, and you can't access your bank without connectivity or physical access to the city," Luke summarized, the legal gears turning rapidly. "How late is the payment?" "It's due tonight. If I miss it, I get hit with a crippling penalty and a potential lien on the property. I bought this place with everything I had, Luke. It's the only real home Lily has ever known. I can't lose it over a snowdrift and a tax law." Luke felt a surge of protective determination, a feeling usually reserved for his most vulnerable clients. This was a real crisis, not a gnome dispute. "Show me the paperwork, Zoe," he said, his voice instantly becoming the calm, commanding tone of the high-powered lawyer. "I can't access my own funds, but I can read documents. I specialize in regulatory compliance and contractual law. If there is a legal loophole, an administrative delay, or a technicality to exploit, I will find it. This is what I do." Zoe hesitated, clearly wrestling with her pride and her fear. She looked at him. The man in the expensive sweater, the man who had dismissed her life as simple, now offering his formidable intellect to save it. "It's in the office," she finally conceded, leading him down a narrow, shadowy hallway to a tiny room overflowing with ledgers, receipts, and a perpetually flashing answering machine. "It's all a mess. I handle the hospitality, my cousin handles the paperwork, and he's not exactly a rocket scientist." For the next 4 hours, Luke Harrington, the man who routinely dealt with documents totaling billions, painstakingly combed through a stack of disorganized small business receipts and county tax forms. He looked completely out of place, his cashmere-clad elbow propped on a desk covered in flour dust and dried cinnamon. He discovered 2 things that were profoundly unsettling. The first was the sheer, terrifying precariousness of Zoe's life. She was brilliant, warm, and generous, but she was living perpetually on the edge, relying on the B&B's slim margins and the kindness of the community. Every transaction was a tightrope walk. The second was a small embossed card tucked into a file labeled Loan Documents. The card was from a major, aggressive commercial real estate developer based in Denver, a name Luke recognized instantly for their reputation for hostile acquisitions and turning small community assets into sterile luxury resorts. The card had a handwritten note on the back, dated 3 months ago. "Zoe, call me immediately regarding restructuring your financing. We can solve your cash flow issues. J. Roth." Luke felt a chill that had nothing to do with the snow. Aggressive debt restructuring from a firm like Roth's didn't solve problems. It created opportunities to foreclose. Zoe wasn't just facing a tax penalty. She might be facing a deliberate, predatory move to acquire her land. He held the card tightly, his face grim. "Zoe," he called out, his voice sharp. "Who is J. Roth, and why are you holding onto a card from a commercial developer?" Zoe appeared in the doorway, drying her hands on a dish towel. She paled when she saw the card in her hand. "Oh, him. He bought the mortgage note from the small local bank when they closed last year. He's been sniffing around the B&B for months. He wants this land. He thinks it would make a great luxury condo development next to his new resort project once the highway expands." She wrung the towel nervously. "He keeps sending me these letters saying he's eager to help me with my financial struggles. I just ignore them." "You can't ignore a man like Roth, Zoe. He uses financial weakness as leverage. He's not trying to help you with the tax deadline. He's trying to pressure you into defaulting so he can swoop in. This is not just a tax issue, Zoe. This is a potential hostile takeover disguised as debt relief." A wave of cold fear washed over Zoe's face. But I thought I had time. I thought if I just made the payment." "You might still have time," Luke interrupted, his mind already calculating the legal moves. "We don't have internet, but we have a radio, and the sheriff is still using his snowmobile. We need to draft a letter, have a local authority witness a physical, handwritten signature, and then get that sheriff to radio a confirmation to the county registrar before midnight tonight. It's a long shot, but it's the only way to hold off the tax penalty, and more importantly, stop Roth from using that penalty as an excuse to pressure you into a quick, cheap sale. We just turned the gingerbread crisis into a corporate defense case." Zoe stared at him, overwhelmed. The high-powered lawyer was back, but this time, he was on her side, fighting for her simple, cozy life against the very type of corporate predator he usually represented. "Luke," she breathed, relief mixed with awe. "You'd do that? For us? You gave me a coat and a warm bed, Zoe. Now, give me some paper, and tell me exactly how you want to word the threat. We're going to use this snowstorm to protect your home. We're going to put up a legal defense so thick Roth won't be able to shovel through it." In the middle of her tiny, flour-dusted office, surrounded by the silence of the snow, Luke felt an authentic, vital purpose. He wasn't saving a corporation's bottom line. He was saving a family's home. And in doing so, he was saving a piece of the pure, unpretentious warmth he was quickly realizing he desperately needed. The intrigue had landed right on his doorstep, and the defense lawyer was ready for the fight, not for the money, but for the soul of Harmony Creek. The transition from high-stakes legal strategy to rustic holiday activity was abrupt and jarring, a shift Luke found oddly exhilarating. Having drafted the meticulously worded force majeure, intent to pay letter, Luke had secured the signature of the local sheriff, a burly, soft-spoken man named Hank, who had agreed to radio the official notice to the county seat before their midnight deadline. The tax crisis, for now, was temporarily neutralized. The threat of J. Roth, however, still loomed large, a corporate vulture circling above the snow line. With the legal battle temporarily on pause, Zoe declared the afternoon a mandatory joy interlude. "We're going to cut the Hearthside's Christmas tree," she announced, pulling on a pair of oversized, bright red gloves. Lily, bundled like a tiny marshmallow in a neon pink snowsuit, let out a whoop of excitement. "Wait, you don't buy a tree?" Luke asked, pulling on the canvas coat and his ridiculously comfortable fuzzy blue slippers, which he now wore with an air of resigned acceptance. "Buy a tree? Luke, we live in the middle of a national forest. That's practically sacrilege," Zoe chuckled, grabbing a rusty handsaw. "We venture out, find the perfect specimen, and give it a loving final home by the fire. It's a Harmony Creek tradition." The three of them, a corporate lawyer, a single mother, and a 7-year-old girl, set off into the silent, pristine landscape behind the B&B. The snow was knee-deep and sparkling under the muted winter sun. The air was so crisp, it felt like breathing pure, frozen oxygen. Luke struggled initially. His expensive footwear was ill-suited for the terrain, and the physical exertion of shoveling the previous day had left his city-honed muscles protesting. But walking behind Zoe and Lily, watching them navigate the snow with easy grace, was a kind of soothing therapy. Lily would stop every few yards to point out a rabbit track or a snow-laden pine cone, her enthusiasm contagious. "We need a tree that's not too tall, not too bushy, but full of heart," Lily pronounced seriously, dragging her reindeer Rudolph through the snow. "It has to be the most courageous tree in the forest." "Courageous tree?" Luke asked, smiling down at her. "Yep," Lily confirmed. "Mom says the best things in life have a quiet courage. They stand up straight, they don't try to be something they're not, and they smell really good." Luke glanced at Zoe, who was watching Lily with a look of boundless love and pride. Zoe met his eye and shrugged. A silent, "What can I say? She's a wise kid," passing between them. They found it nestled on a small, untouched ridge, a perfect Douglas fir, about 9 feet tall, its branches symmetrically tiered, dusted with snow, and exuding a powerful resinous scent. It was magnificent. "This is it," Zoe whispered, her voice filled with reverence. "The Hearthside tree of 2024. Zoe handed the rusty saw to Luke. "Okay, counselor, your turn. Time for precision cutting, not precision brief writing. Low to the ground, even strokes. Don't waste energy." He felt a familiar pulse of pressure. He knew how to argue a complex legal point before the Supreme Court, but this simple, primal task felt terrifyingly crucial. He knelt in the snow, his cashmere dampening instantly. He set the saw against the trunk and began to saw. The work was slow, arduous, and rhythmic. Shh, shh, shh. He focused on the wood, the scent, the feel of the rough metal in his hands. Lily and Zoe stood quietly, cheering him on in hushed tones. As the trunk thinned, the tree began to groan, a soft, protesting sigh. Finally, with one last deep push, the trunk snapped. The tree tilted slowly, then fell with a muffled thud onto the soft snow. Luke sat back on his heels, covered in snow, panting and entirely exhilarated. "I did it," he murmured, a genuine childlike triumph coloring his voice. "You did," Zoe confirmed, her voice soft with admiration. She knelt beside him, brushing a pine needle from his cheek. Her touch, simple and maternal, yet intensely electric, made his breath catch. "You're full of surprises, Luke Harrington." As they dragged the massive tree back toward the B&B, an awkward, winding trek that required them to work closely together, the quiet connection between Luke and Zoe deepened. Lily, now safely on Zoe's back, was giving directions and singing off-key Christmas carols. Luke and Zoe walked shoulder to shoulder, their shared effort pulling them physically and emotionally closer. "Why the rush to pay the taxes, Zoe?" Luke asked quietly, breaking the rhythm of the work. "Why not just let the penalty lapse and deal with Roth after the new year? You seem prepared for hardship." Zoe sighed, the sound escaping her lips like a puff of steam. "I wasn't always this prepared, Luke. 5 years ago, when I left my city job and bought this place, I thought I was invincible. I was wrong. I put too much trust in a bad business partner who convinced me to overinvest in the property before the winter season." She paused, her eyes fixed on the path ahead. "It was terrifying, a lonely experience. I was so ashamed. I barely had enough to feed Lily. We lived off canned soup and donated clothes that Christmas. It taught me one thing: never be late. Never give the bank or a man like Jay Roth a reason to take what you've built with your two own hands. That fear, it doesn't leave you." Luke understood. He didn't understand financial precarity, but he understood the cold shame of perceived failure. His whole life was driven by the fear of being seen as less than perfect. "My first big case," Luke began, surprising himself with the confession. "I was 27. My father told me I wasn't ready to handle a client with that profile. I took it anyway, trying to prove him wrong. I won the case, but the client was clearly guilty. I got him off on a technicality, making him millions, and getting my father's grudging nod of approval. But I felt hollow. I felt like I had used my skill to perpetuate injustice, not uphold it." He looked at the snow, the perfect, unblemished white. "I haven't felt that sense of purpose since I helped Mrs. Gable with her gnome, or since I spent the afternoon hauling this tree. In the city, I'm constantly chasing achievement. Here, I'm just present. And it's terrifying because I don't know who I am without the chase." Zoe stopped pulling, turning to face him fully. Lily, sensing the shift, nestled quietly against her mother's neck. "You're a really good man, Luke," she whispered, her voice filled with quiet conviction. "You just need to get out of the way of the lawyer. That big brain of yours, use it to fight for the good things, not just the lucrative things. You're a natural defender, Luke. Just pick the right client." Her gaze was warm, honest, and utterly persuasive. Standing in the middle of the silent, snowbound forest, Luke felt a profound recognition. She saw him. She saw the exhaustion, the fear, and the core decency he kept locked away behind his professional armor. They were inches apart, their breath mingling in the cold air. The weight of the world, the expectations of Aspen, and the snowdrift itself seemed to disappear. He felt an intense, overwhelming urge to close the remaining distance, to kiss her, to pull her into the warmth she exuded. Zoe's eyes fluttered shut for a brief moment, her lips slightly parted, acknowledging the undeniable connection sparking between them. The moment stretched, thick with unspoken desire, and the crisp, clean scent of pine. But before Luke could move, Lily stirred, yawning loudly. "Mommy, I'm cold. Can we go decorate the tree now? Rudolph wants his lights." The moment shattered, the tension broken by the pure, innocent demand of a child. Zoe's eyes flew open, a flush rising on her cheeks. He cleared her throat and gave Luke a quick, professional smile. "Time to decorate," she said, her voice a little breathless. "The Hearthside tree needs its courage." She turned and began pulling the saw, her pace quickening. Luke followed, his heart hammering in urgent rhythm against his ribs. He felt clumsy, exposed, and deeply, irrevocably drawn to her. He had come here committed to Aspen, but he was leaving his heart somewhere under a blanket of snow, right next to a newly felled Douglas fir. The connection was real, beautiful, and utterly undeniable. The lawyer was quickly losing the argument against the man. Chapter 7. The B&B was transformed into a carnival of light and simple holiday cheer. Lily, Zoe, and a handful of local residents who had drifted in to help and warm up with Zoe's chili were diligently decorating the enormous Douglas fir. The air smelled of hot cider, popcorn, and pine. Luke, perched precariously on a rickety step stool, was handling the highest branches, a task he performed with newfound, if still clumsy, competence. He found a strange, deep joy in the task. There were no designer ornaments here, only handmade wooden carvings, strung popcorn, and paper chains. He placed a misshapen, hand-painted wooden star on a high branch. Feeling a connection to this simple, anonymous creativity that dwarfed the pride he took in signing a complex legal document. Just as he stepped down, his phone, which he had left charging near the one dusty landline in the small office, emitted a sharp, insistent chirp. The sound cut through the cozy domesticity like a surgeon's knife. 1 bar, weak 3G. He snatched it up. It wasn't a call. It was a burst of 3 text messages sent minutes ago, likely delivered in a sudden, brief fluctuation in service caused by the change in barometric pressure. The first was from his assistant. "Mr. Harrington, the board is requesting your immediate approval on the amended merger filing. We need to know where you are. Your father has called 3 times. The second, from his mother, Eleanor Harrington. "Luke, where are you? The storm is not an excuse. Arthur is furious. The guests are arriving. Call immediately." The third, a short, chilling text from his father, Judge Arthur Harrington. "Deviation is not an option. Your commitment is mandatory. Resolve this and report." Luke felt the physical weight of his old life crashing down on him. The warmth of the B&B, the smell of pine, the joy of the tree, all of it seemed to dissolve, replaced by the cold, sterile reality of his obligations. His heart began to pound a frantic, anxious rhythm, the familiar feeling of dread returning with punishing speed. He quickly ducked into the little office, closing the door softly against the sounds of carols. He needed to make a choice, and fast. He could lie, say he was at a temporary hunting lodge or a remote client meeting, and that the storm had knocked out his landline. Or he could admit the truth. He was trapped in a no-name town, wearing fuzzy blue slippers and falling for a B&B owner. He chose the path of avoidance, the one that had guided his entire adult life. He hastily typed a reply to his assistant, "On a remote client visit, unforeseen weather, cannot process filing until I have a secure line. Proceed with the draft and use my provisional approval. I will call after Christmas." Then he typed a cautious, neutral text to his mother. "Safe. Cannot travel. Roads impassable. I will join you as soon as the pass is clear. Send my regrets to father." He had sent. The phone struggled for a full minute. the sending bar inching across the screen before finally, mercifully, confirming the delivery. Just as quickly, the service vanished, leaving the screen blank. Luke leaned against the cold wall, his head bowed. He had chosen the lie. He had hidden the truth of Harmony Creek, of Zoe, of the pure, simple joy he was finding. He was ashamed, but he was also terrified of the alternative. The idea of telling his father he was trading an Aspen Christmas for a chili potluck felt like confessing treason. A few minutes later, Zoe opened the office door, carrying 2 mugs of mulled cider. She immediately sensed the shift in his energy. He was tense, coiled, and his eyes held the haunted, distant look of a man suddenly wrestling with ghosts. "Are you okay, Luke? You disappeared," she asked gently, handing him a mug. He took a large, stabilizing gulp of the warm cider. "Yes, no, I got a few messages through. My office, my family, the inevitable. They're demanding an explanation for my deviation." "And what did you tell them?" "That I was delayed by the storm. I said I was at a remote client location. I couldn't tell them I was here. Zoe, not yet." He ran a frustrated hand through his hair. "I can't risk the fallout, the ridicule. My father." "Your father. It always comes back to him, doesn't it? What is he expecting, Luke? What is the real purpose of this mandatory Christmas?" Luke hesitated, then let the ugly truth spill out. "He's lining up the next phase of my career. He's introducing me to his friends, the ones who control the judiciary and the big corporate defense contracts. It's about securing my future, cementing the Harrington name at the highest levels. This year, it's particularly important because they want me to take the lead on a major national regulatory case. It's a stepping stone, a career-defining moment. My absence suggests I'm not prioritizing their world. And if you don't take this case, I lose decades of inherited goodwill. I disappoint them irrevocably. I become the black sheep. I become irrelevant to the people who control my life." Zoe looked around her small, messy but warm office. Irrelevant to them, maybe, but relevant to whom? To yourself? To Lily, who thinks you're the strongest tree cutter in the world? To me, who knows you're fighting for my B&B right now? She slid off the desk and stood close to him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Luke, you're looking at a ghost of Christmas future right now. The one where you go back, win the case, make the millions, and still feel empty. Is that life worth fighting a blizzard to reach? Or is this, right here, a hint of the life you were meant to live?" Her touch, her honesty, and the sound of Lily's laughter from the next room were powerful counter-arguments to his fear. He closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against the cool wood of the doorframe. The contrast between the rigid, controlled power of his family and the genuine, chaotic warmth of Harmony Creek was almost unbearable. "I don't know how to stop," Luke admitted, the lawyer's voice cracked with vulnerability. "I'm afraid if I stop, I'll be nothing." "You'll be Luke," Zoe said softly, her hand squeezing his arm in a comforting, solid pressure. "Now I need your help. The community hall is too small for this many people, so the potluck is going to be here at the B&B. Mrs. Gable is bringing her famous cranberry loaf, and you, my brave tree cutter, are in charge of clearing the snow off the porch so people can drop off their food without slipping." She gave him a challenging, affectionate smile. "Come on. The best way to forget about a hostile family is to get to work on a hostile loaf of bread." Luke managed a small, genuine smile. Zoe didn't offer sympathy, she offered purpose. She didn't try to solve his emotional crisis, she gave him a task. He felt the tension ease slightly, replaced by a sense of necessary action. He was still terrified of the future, but for this moment he had a task, a cause, and a compelling, warm reason to stay put. He was a lawyer on retainer to Harmony Creek, and his retainer was due in the form of cleared snow. As he walked out, leaving the cold, sterile ghosts of his old life behind in the office, he knew he was choosing defiance, not just of the storm, but of the life that had been chosen for him. The courage to face his family would come later. For now, he would find courage in the simple act of defending Zoe's home and embracing her community. The battle lines were drawn: Aspen versus Harmony Creek, fear versus warmth, and Luke Harrington was finally starting to pick a side.
Chapter 8. Christmas Eve night descended upon Harmony Creek, cloaked in a thick, insulating blanket of snow. The blizzard relief potluck was in full swing. The Hearthside B&B, usually quiet and cozy, was now humming with the joyous chaos of the community. The main parlor was packed with the residents of Harmony Creek, all sharing food, laughter, and stories of past snow-ins. Luke stood on the periphery, holding a bowl of Zoe's famous chili and watching the spectacle. He was still wearing the fuzzy blue slippers, his expensive sweater, and a look of profound disbelief. He felt like an anthropologist observing a rare, beautiful tribal ritual. Everyone here knew each other, genuinely cared for each other, and accepted him, the stranger, without question or judgment. They talked about things he rarely encountered: gardening, local history, the proper way to roast chestnuts, and the ever-present drama of Mrs. Gable's gingerbread house ambitions. As he was listening to the sheriff, Hank, recount a tale of a stubborn mountain goat, Luke noticed Zoe slipping away toward the small office, her face etched with a line of worry that belied the cheer she had projected all evening. He followed her immediately. He found her hunched over the desk, her expression illuminated by the dim desk lamp. She was staring at the county tax form, twisting her hands in worry. "The radio confirmation?" Luke asked softly, stepping into the room. Zoe jumped, startled. "Oh, Luke, yes." Hank radioed the county registrar just an hour ago, confirming the intent to pay due to the force majeure. They acknowledged the notice. So for now, the penalty is delayed. We're safe from the immediate tax deadline. "Good," Luke said, relief washing over him. "That buys us 2 weeks to get the roads cleared and process the payment. But that's only half the battle, Zoe. What about Roth?" "That's the problem," she admitted, placing her hand on the real estate developer's card. "I got a brief, garbled text back just before the service cut out again. It was from Roth's legal secretary. She said, 'Mr. Roth declines any forbearance. Expect immediate contact regarding your outstanding debt obligation on the B&B loan upon the highway reopening. Merry Christmas.'" Luke's jaw tightened. The man is a predator. He's not waiting for you to fail. He's creating the failure. He knows that 2 weeks is just enough time for him to file a motion, get a quick court order, and seize your assets before you can mount a proper defense. He wants this land, and he knows a small-town lawyer won't be able to stop him quickly enough. He paced the small office, the scent of dust and old paper filling his nostrils. His adrenaline, the same sharp energy that propelled him through all-night defense briefs, surged. This was a real fight against a truly unethical opponent, and it was personal. "We need to go on the offensive. We can't just delay. We need to eliminate his leverage. You said he bought the mortgage note from the small local bank when they closed, right?" "Yes. It was the only option when the local bank went under." Luke stopped pacing. His eyes, usually cool and calculating, now held a bright, determined spark. "That's it. That's the loophole. When a local, small community financial institution closes, they often have state and county protections, legacy regulations designed to protect residents from exactly this kind of predatory acquisition by out-of-state entities." He grabbed a thick, dusty ledger from a shelf, the B&B's original mortgage and closing documents. He ignored the flour and cinnamon, his focus absolute. He flipped through the ancient paperwork, searching for the specific language of the original loan under the local bank's jurisdiction. Zoe watched him, completely mesmerized. The man who had been helpless with a shovel was now in his element, a force of intellectual nature, his mind moving with lightning speed through the dense, archaic language of small-town finance law. "There!" Luke exclaimed, his fingers stabbing a paragraph written in a faded copperplate script. Section 4.1. This is a local ordinance, not a federal one. It states that, in the event the original lender is acquired by or transferred to an out-of-county or out-of-state holding entity, the original borrower retains the right to buy back the full debt obligation at the note's original principal amount, regardless of current market valuation or accrued interest, provided said option is exercised within 6 months of the transfer notification. Zoe stared at the paragraph, then at Luke, utterly bewildered. "What does that mean, Luke, in normal person English?" "It means," Luke said, a wide, triumphant smile spreading across his face, a smile more genuine and exhilarating than any he had ever worn in a Chicago courtroom. "It means that when Roth bought your mortgage, the law requires the previous bank to have notified you of your right to buy back your loan at the original, lower principal amount. Roth bought the note after the bank closed, which means he acquired the note with the specific local clause attached. If you were never properly notified of your 6-month buyback right, the clause remains open, dormant, and immediately exercisable." He looked at her, his voice dropping to an intense, confidential whisper. "Zoe, if you can find proof that Roth, or the closing bank, failed to send you a registered letter specifically notifying you of this buyback right, and I guarantee he didn't, because he wouldn't want you to exercise it, we can force him to sell the debt note back to you. It would be at the lower, original principal, eliminating all the predatory high interest rates and fees he's tacked on. It's an instant, total victory." Zoe's eyes were wide with shock, hope, and overwhelming gratitude. "Luke, I don't remember any such notice, just the standard transfer paperwork. How would we prove it now? The service is out and the bank is closed." "We use the local community power that Roth completely underestimated," Luke said, already moving toward the door. "We need Sheriff Hank. He's the only one with radio access to the county recorder's office. If the notice was sent by certified mail, there will be a registered receipt and a date of delivery. If not, the debt belongs to you for a price you can actually pay." 20 minutes later, Luke and Zoe were huddled with Sheriff Hank in the B&B's garage, the sheriff's radio crackling intermittently with static. Luke dictated the exact filing number and reference codes from the mortgage documents, his memory for data astonishingly sharp. Hank, skeptical but cooperative, radioed to the county recorder's office, which, miraculously, had a skeleton crew working on Christmas Eve. The wait was excruciating. The party in the parlor seemed a world away. Finally, Hank's face broke into a wide, amazed grin. "Got it! They cross-referenced the file. The original bank sent the standard transfer notification, but they failed to include the legally mandated notice of the right of first refusal buyback under Ordinance 4.1. The clerk confirms no such registered notice was ever filed or recorded." Luke let out a long, slow breath of pure professional victory. "That's it, Zoe. We just neutralized J. Roth. The moment the road's clear, we file a claim for specific performance under that local ordinance. He has no leverage. He can't foreclose on a loan you have a legal right to buy back at a fraction of the current cost. Your B&B is safe." Zoe looked at Luke, tears welling in her eyes. It wasn't just the B&B. It was her life, her Lily's future, her security, all salvaged by the unexpected application of his formidable intellect. "Luke," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She stepped forward, ignoring the legal documents, the dust, and the flickering light. She reached up, placed her hands on either side of his face and pulled him down into a searing, grateful kiss. It was not the slow, tension-filled kiss of the forest. This was a kiss of relief, of adrenaline, of pure, overwhelming gratitude. His hands automatically went to her waist, pulling her flush against him. The difference in their worlds, their clothes, their lives, vanished in the sudden, raw immediacy of their connection. His heart, which had been racing from the legal maneuver, now pounded for a completely different reason. When they finally broke apart, Zoe was breathless, her eyes shining with unshed tears and a new, dazzling hope. "Thank you, Luke," she managed, her voice husky. Luke couldn't speak. He simply looked at her, overwhelmed by the power of the moment. He hadn't just won a case, he had won a piece of her heart, and in doing so, he felt a strange, profound sense of peace. This, he realized, was the true purpose he had been searching for. Not the money, not the power, but the courageous act of defending something purely good. His professional life had finally intersected with his conscience, and the reward was standing right in front of him, radiating warmth and strength. He had a feeling he would gladly wear fuzzy slippers for the rest of his life if it meant protecting her. The thrill of their victory and the intensity of the kiss lingered in the air of the small office, creating an intoxicating bubble of warmth against the cold reality of the blizzard. Zoe and Luke stood close, their hands still touching, a silent acknowledgement of the boundary that had just dissolved between them. The sounds of the Christmas Eve potluck, laughter, the scraping of chairs, and the distant, cheerful strains of a guitar seemed muted, respecting the private, electric moment. We should go back," Zoe said finally, her voice still a little breathless, her eyes refusing to leave his. "Before Lily comes looking for me. She's supposed to put the star on the tree tonight." "Wait," Luke murmured, catching her hand. He needed to anchor this moment, to understand what had just happened. "Zoe, that wasn't just gratitude, was it?" Zoe looked down at their joined hands, then back up at him, her hazel eyes serious and vulnerable. "No, Luke, it wasn't. You showed me the man under the suit, the one who uses his power to save a simple B&B from a corporate bully. That man, he's impossible not to feel something for." She stepped back, creating a necessary distance, but the tension remained. "But you can't feel something for me, Luke. You're Luke Harrington. You belong in Aspen, signing those billion-dollar deals and marrying the woman your father selects. I'm Zoe Miller. I run a B&B, I negotiate with Mrs. Gable over gingerbread, and I have a daughter who's already completely in love with you." "And that's a problem?" "It is when the road opens tomorrow. I can't do temporary. Lily and I have been abandoned before, Luke. I won't let us be a footnote in your corporate memoir, the quirky mountain girl who taught me the true meaning of Christmas before you flew back to your real life. The stakes here are simple but absolute. Stay or go. And go for you means everything, doesn't it?" Luke felt a sudden, profound, and painful wave of self-awareness. He had spent his entire life in motion, running from stillness, from self-reflection. But standing here, facing Zoe's honest, courageous vulnerability, he couldn't run anymore. The external blizzard was a metaphor for the internal one raging inside him. "You're right," Luke admitted, the admission feeling like a weight lifted from his chest. "I am terrified of disappointing my family. I am terrified of losing the life I've built. But you're wrong about one thing. That life isn't real. It's an obligation. It's a gold-plated cage." He pushed himself off the wall and took a step closer to her, his expression intense. "Zoe, my mother manages my itinerary like a corporate filing. My father only acknowledges my existence when I'm winning. The woman I was supposed to marry was a strategic alliance, vetted by my firm for her political connections.
I was supposed to propose to her this Christmas. Every Christmas in Aspen is a performance, a carefully choreographed dance to maintain their illusion of perfection. I'm not a partner. I'm a prodigal son trying to earn a father's love. And I'm exhausted. I've realized in the last 48 hours, shoveling snow and fighting for your home, that I would rather be here, in the cold, with a real, messy problem, than in that sterile mansion discussing market liquidity with people who don't know my middle name. He reached out and gently took her hands again, his grip firm and sincere. I risked my career by lying to my family today, by prioritizing your tax lien over my merger filing. I did that because the peace I find here with you and Lily is more valuable than their approval. The courage of your life, building this home from scratch, facing down a man like Roth, that's the real achievement, not anything I've ever done. Luke, she whispered, tears finally escaping and running down her cheeks. That's a huge thing to admit. It's the truth, and the truth is the only thing that's going to clear this blizzard, Luke said, gesturing toward the howling sound outside. The wind had suddenly picked up, roaring against the window pane, confirming the intensification of the storm that Sheriff Hank had warned them about. As if on cue, a sudden, blinding flash of light outside, followed by a loud, disconcerting crack and a deep, grinding thud, shook the entire B&B. The lights in the office and the rest of the house immediately blinked out. The only illumination was the faint glow filtering from the parlor and the cold moonlight reflecting off the snow outside. The silence that followed was total and terrifying. Luke immediately went to the window, pulling aside the curtain. Outside, the night was chaos. Visibility was near zero, and the wind was howling like a hungry animal. What was that? Zoe's voice was sharp with alarm. It sounded like a transformer, Luke said, his lawyer instincts replaced by a primal need to protect. We've lost power, and that crack was too loud. It was either a major tree limb or a utility pole. The furnace, Zoe gasped, pushing past him. It's gas, but the fan is electric. If the temperature drops too fast, the pipes will freeze, and with this many people inside... She didn't need to finish the sentence. Luke's mind immediately focused on the problem. No power meant no heat, no water, eventually, and no means of communication. They were completely isolated, and the temperature outside was plummeting. The suspense was no longer financial, it was existential. They rushed back into the main parlor. The sight was startling. The cheerful crowd was now illuminated only by the massive stone fireplace and the flickering light of numerous candles and lanterns that Zoe, with preemptive mountain wisdom, had placed strategically around the room. Lily was clinging to Mrs. Gable's arm, her eyes wide with fear. The chatter had stopped, replaced by a low, anxious murmur. Zoe immediately took control. All right, everyone, Harmony Creek is just proving a point. We've lost power, probably a down line on the county road. We have plenty of wood, plenty of blankets, and plenty of chili. Hank, I need you to assess the generator. It's in the shed behind the kitchen. Luke, I need you to check the kitchen. I want every pot filled with water and put on the wood stove now. We need to retain as much heat as possible and keep the hot water flowing to the first floor bathroom pipes. Luke didn't hesitate. He grabbed 2 empty pots and headed for the kitchen, his mind moving from complex legal strategy to simple survival mechanics. He was not a lawyer right now. He was a functional part of a community responding to a real crisis. As he worked, efficiently filling the pots and placing them over the small auxiliary wood stove in the kitchen, he watched Zoe. She was a beacon of calm, reassuring the elderly, assigning blankets, and directing the children toward the hearth. She was a natural leader, radiating strength and courage in the face of genuine peril. She didn't panic, she acted. When he returned to the parlor, Zoe was standing by the fireplace, her face bathed in the warm, flickering light. She looked over at him, her eyes catching his. He saw the fatigue and the fear, but also the resolute determination that made her so beautiful. He walked up to her, not to talk, but just to stand beside her, a silent demonstration of support. He was no longer the client, he was her partner in the crisis. "It's going to be a long night," Zoe whispered, leaning her head briefly against his shoulder. "We'll get through it, Zoe," Luke vowed, his arm instantly going around her shoulders, pulling her close. He looked out at the faces illuminated by the fireplace, Lily asleep on a pile of blankets, Mrs. Gable knitting furiously, and Hank wiping soot from his hands. This was a community. This was warmth. The storm howled outside, a terrifying, beautiful sound of unleashed nature. But inside, Luke had finally found his center. He had shed the lies, faced the truth, and committed himself not to a corporation, but to the people standing beside him. The blizzard had not trapped him. It had freed him.
Chapter 10. The night was long, cold, and profoundly intimate. The Hearthside B&B, stripped of its modern utilities, became a true haven, a pre-industrial shelter built on shared humanity. All the guests and townsfolk, about 15 people in total, were gathered in the main parlor, huddled around the roaring stone fireplace. The air was thick with the scent of wood smoke, damp wool, and the faint, comforting remnants of chili and cider. Luke, despite his earlier exhaustion, was operating on a pure, primal need to be useful. After checking the non-functional generator, he joined Hank and a few other men to carefully reinforce the B&B's windows against the fierce, biting wind, using thick blankets and duct tape found in the utility closet. He worked without complaint, his hands now rough and calloused, a genuine contrast to the man who had arrived in sterile, three-pieced armor. When he returned, Zoe was organizing the space, ensuring the children were safely bundled near the hearth. Lily was fast asleep, curled up next to the stuffed reindeer, Rudolph, a picture of perfect, innocent peace. Zoe handed Luke a thick wool blanket and a chipped enamel mug of warm water. "Thank you, Luke. You've been incredible. I don't know what I would have done without you." "I was trained to handle high-pressure situations, Zoe. Just usually the pressure comes from a judge, not a blizzard." "No," Zoe shook her head, sitting on the rug near the fire, her back resting against his chair. "A lawyer would have called an insurance company and waited for a rescue. You went out in the dark, in that ridiculous sweater, and sealed the windows. You acted like one of us, like family." The word hung in the air. Family. It was a word that, for Luke, had always been synonymous with obligation, judgment, and cold scrutiny. Here it meant warmth, shared effort, and unconditional acceptance. Luke rested his hand lightly on Zoe's shoulder. "My family is likely sipping expensive champagne in Aspen, annoyed that I'm not there to toast their portfolio's performance. They don't need me. They need my obedience. This is different." Zoe reached up and covered his hand with hers. "We just needed a man with good sense and a lot of heart. And it turns out the high-powered lawyer from Chicago fit the bill perfectly." As the night wore on and the storm reached its zenith, a quiet, almost reverent atmosphere settled over the parlor. With no screens, no distractions, and the shared vulnerability of the cold, people began to talk in low, sincere tones. An elderly woman, Mrs. Peterson, began to softly recount the town's origin story, followed by Hank, the sheriff, telling a surprisingly poignant story of how he met his late wife at the annual Harmony Creek Fall Festival. Luke, listening to these simple, honest tales of love, loss, and community,
felt the ice around his heart melting faster than any snow outside. Eventually, Zoe pulled out an old, beat-up guitar. She began to strum a simple, gentle melody, not a recognizable carol, but a quiet, folk-style tune. Her voice, which was usually bright and cheerful, was low, resonant, and filled with deep emotion. It was a song about holding on to hope through a long, dark winter, about the strength of the mountains and the comfort of a hearth. As she sang, her eyes found Luke's. The connection was immediate and profound. A silent conversation played out over the warm melody and the flickering candlelight. It was a declaration of mutual respect, shared vulnerability, and a burgeoning love that had taken root in the most unexpected of blizzards. When the song ended, the parlor remained silent for a long moment, filled only with the crackling of the fire. "That was beautiful, Luke," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Zoe put the guitar down. She turned fully toward him, her hazel eyes liquid in the firelight, reflecting the intense feeling in the room. "It was for the courage, Luke," she murmured, referencing Lily's word for the tree. "It takes courage to face the cold, but it takes more courage to stop running from a life that isn't yours." She reached up and placed her hand gently on his cheek. "You're a man who was supposed to be in a 12,000 square foot house, and you're here, wearing those slippers, and protecting my daughter and my home. You fought for us, Luke, and you've shown me what real strength is. It's not about the size of the deal. It's about the depth of the commitment." Luke felt the last of his resistance dissolve. The rigid standards of his father, the fear of judgment, the compulsion to achieve, all of it seemed trivial compared to the genuine, heartfelt commitment he felt for this woman. He had found his purpose in her defense and his peace in her presence. He gently lifted his hand, cupping the back of her head, his fingers tangled in the soft, dark curls. "I'm not going back, Luke," he said. The words a promise more binding than any legal contract he had ever signed. "Not to the life I left behind. I don't know what that means yet, but I know what I want. I want this. I want this simplicity, this honesty, this warmth." He leaned in, and this time the kiss was slow, deliberate, and deeply committed. It was a kiss that acknowledged the future, a silent vow made in the middle of a snowstorm. The blizzard outside roared on, but inside, Luke felt only a perfect, profound peace. He was home. They broke apart, breathless but connected by a newfound certainty. "Merry Christmas, Luke," she whispered, her voice husky. "Merry Christmas, Luke," he replied, pulling her close, resting his head against hers. As the first faint light of Christmas morning began to penetrate the frosted windows, bathing the snow-covered parlor in a gentle, ethereal glow, Luke looked around at the sleeping, huddled figures. He saw Lily's peaceful face, Mrs. Gable's gently snoring form, and Hank resting near the door. This was his found family. This was the true meaning of warmth and community. He had come to Aspen to fulfill an expectation, but he had ended up in Harmony Creek, fulfilling his soul. The journey was over, and the real life was finally beginning.
Chapter 11. Christmas morning dawned, quiet and breathtakingly beautiful. The snow had finally stopped. The mountains, usually distant, were now sharp, clear giants, their peaks dusted in impossible white. The B&B was bathed in a brilliant, blinding light, though the power remained out. Luke woke to the sound of Lily's excited chatter and the sight of Zoe already tending to the fire. Lily, rubbing the sleep from her eyes, spotted Luke in his armchair, covered in a wool blanket.
"Luke, it's Christmas, and look," she squealed, pointing to the window. The snow stopped. Does that mean the gingerbread competition is back on? Luke chuckled, stretching his stiff limbs. It means the roads might be open soon, Lily, but first, presents. The morning was spent in the gentle chaos of a true family Christmas. Zoe produced simple, thoughtful gifts for Lily, a new set of art supplies, a book of fairy tales, and a warm, hand-knitted scarf. Luke, having nothing, felt momentarily awkward, but Zoe waved away his apology. Your presence is the present, and you saved my B&B? That's a lifetime supply of generosity. She smiled warmly. He watched her and Lily, a pang of fierce protective love running through him. He had never witnessed such unadulterated, unscripted joy. By mid-morning, Sheriff Hank, having managed to get his snowmobile started, returned with news. The good news is the county plows are on the main road and the power crew is here to fix the line. The bad news is it will still be hours before the road out is fully clear. But I did manage to get a quick message out on the county line to the wider network. He looked directly at Luke, his expression suddenly serious. Luke, the message you sent to your family, well, they didn't take kindly to the remote client visit line. Your father seems to have pulled some strings. There's a private helicopter being dispatched from Aspen. It should arrive around noon once the visibility in the mountain pass is certified safe. They're coming to extract you, Luke. The news hit the parlor like a shot of cold air. The cozy bubble burst. The world, the high-powered, demanding world Luke had fled, was coming to reclaim him. Luke felt a familiar wave of nausea and fear, but it was quickly replaced by a resolute calm. He looked at Zoe, whose face was pale, but whose gaze was steady and unwavering, holding him accountable to the promises he had made the night before. I need to make a call, Luke said, his voice clipped and firm. I need to talk to my father before that helicopter lands. Hank led him back to the office, where a single landline had just sputtered back to life. Luke picked up the phone, his hand trembling only slightly. He dialed the familiar, imposing number of the Aspen estate. His father answered on the first ring. His voice was cold, sharp, and laced with controlled fury. Luke, explain yourself. This incompetence is unprofessional. You left a critical merger filing unsigned, and you've been unreachable for 72 hours. This remote client nonsense is beneath you. Your mother is distraught. Get on that helicopter and report immediately. Luke closed his eyes, taking a deep breath of the wood smoke and pine-scented air, the air of Harmony Creek. He looked at Zoe, standing quietly in the doorway, her presence giving him the strength he needed. Father, Luke began, his voice steady, commanding, and utterly devoid of his usual need for deference. I am safe. I am in Harmony Creek. I will not be taking the helicopter. The silence on the other end was vast and profound, a silence that spoke volumes of shattered expectation. What? Are you insane, Luke? Are you throwing away 30 years of ambition for a snowdrift? For what? Some frivolous holiday romance in a hovel? You do this and you are cut off. You are finished. You will have no access to the firm, no access to the trust, and no access to this family. You will be nothing. Luke stood tall, looking directly at Zoe. Her eyes held pride, love, and a quiet validation that was worth more than his entire inheritance.
I've realized I've been nothing for 30 years, Father, Luke said, his voice thick with emotion, but firm with finality. I have been living your definition of success, and it's hollow. I just spent the last 3 days here using my legal skills to save a small business from a predatory developer, a man exactly like the clients I used to save for you. That felt more worthwhile than every case I've ever won in Chicago. I have found true meaning, Father. And it's not in the M&A division, it's in the courage of a woman named Zoe Miller, and in the warmth of a community I didn't even know existed. He paused,
letting the finality of his decision sink into the heavy, shocked silence. You wanted a high-powered defense lawyer, Father. I am now officially on retainer for Harmony Creek. Consider my commitment terminated. Merry Christmas. Luke gently placed the receiver back in the cradle, cutting the line completely. He stood there, feeling the adrenaline rush of professional suicide and the exhilarating freedom of a soul finally unshackled. The phone line immediately went dead again, a final, definitive barrier between his old life and his new one. He turned to Zoe, his heart overflowing. "I'm staying," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "I burned the bridge, Zoe. I resigned. I chose Harmony Creek." Zoe walked to him, tears streaming down her face, and threw her arms around his neck. "Oh, Luke, that was the bravest thing I have ever heard. It was easy because I knew where I belonged. I belong here, with you." Just as their embrace deepened, the distinctive whoop, whoop, whoop of a helicopter's rotors began to churn the air outside. The sound grew louder, closer, shaking the small B&B. Luke knew it was his family's extraction team, the final dramatic test of his will. He looked at Zoe, a clear message in his eyes. "We need to go outside. I need to send them back." They walked out onto the porch together. The helicopter, a sleek, black, powerful machine, was hovering low over the adjacent field, the wind from its blades swirling the snow into a terrifying vortex. The pilot, seeing the people, cut the engine, and the terrifying silence returned. A man in a sharp, expensive suit jumped out, carrying a briefcase. He looked at Luke, then at Zoe and Lily, who were now standing fearlessly at Luke's side. "Mr. Harrington," the man shouted, his voice crisp and authoritative. "Your father instructs you to take this envelope and board immediately. There are contracts that require your signature." Luke stepped forward, placing himself between the man and Zoe. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the car keys to the Mercedes and the antique key to the Evergreen suite. "You tell my father 2 things," Luke said, his voice projected with the commanding authority of a senior partner. "First, the contracts are irrelevant. My resignation is final. Second, you can take the car, the briefcase, and every single material asset I brought with me back to Aspen. The only things I will be keeping are these." He held up the fuzzy blue slippers he was still wearing. He looked at the pilot and the sharply dressed man, his gaze unwavering. "I'm staying in Harmony Creek. My home is here now. Turn the helicopter around." The man stared, completely aghast at the sight of Luke Harrington, the legal prodigy, choosing fuzzy slippers and a single mother over a billion-dollar legacy. Luke, standing there in the snow, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the mountains and the warmth of his chosen family, had never felt more powerful, more courageous, or more free. The final path was clearing, and it led straight back to Zoe. The helicopter, its mission aborted, lifted back into the cold, clear sky, its powerful rotors churning the snow once more before it vanished over the ridge, taking with it the last physical remnants of Luke's old life, the Mercedes, the briefcase, the constant pressure. Luke stood on the porch, watching it go, a wave of profound, cleansing relief washing over him. He was cold, unshaven, and wearing a ridiculous pair of navy blue slippers, and he had never felt so much like himself. He turned back to find Zoe and Lily standing side by side, their faces alight with a mixture of awe and joy. Lily rushed forward and threw her arms around his waist. "You really stayed, Luke. You chose Rudolph and the B&B." Luke knelt, embracing her fiercely. "I did, sweetie. I chose my new home." He looked up at Zoe, who was smiling through fresh tears. "That was terrifying and magnificent. You gave up everything. I gave up a cage, Zoe, and in return, I gained everything that actually matters. You, Lily, this community, the chance to finally build a life based on genuine values, not perceived obligations. The rest of Christmas Day was the most peaceful Luke had ever experienced. The power crew managed to fix the down line just after lunch, bringing the B&B back to life with a triumphant surge of light and heat. With the crisis averted and the roads still too icy for travel, the community potluck continued, transforming into a relaxed, cheerful gathering. The gingerbread competition, though lacking the industrial strength glue gun, was a hilarious, messy affair won by Lily, with some unsolicited legal advice from Luke regarding the unfair application of frosting as structural support. That evening, as the sun set in a brilliant blaze of pink and orange over the snow-covered peaks, Luke and Zoe found a quiet moment together on the small, cleared porch. The air was still, cold, and electric with promise. "So," Zoe began, leaning against the sturdy cedar railing, looking out over the pristine white landscape. "You're Luke Harrington, the high-powered lawyer, with no job, no car, and no home address, except Harmony Creek, temporarily?" Luke smiled, taking her hand and lacing his fingers through hers. Her hand, rough from work, felt perfectly matched to his. "I'm Luke Harrington, the former high-powered lawyer who is now officially unemployed and the proud owner of one pair of very warm house slippers. I'll need to sort out the logistics, of course. I have capital, but I have no intention of using it to just buy a sterile new life. I want to build one." "What would that look like?" Zoe asked, her eyes full of hope. "It looks like this." Luke gestured around them, at the quiet town, the warm glow of the B&B, and the vast, silent mountains. "I could buy a small cottage here. I could dedicate my time to pro bono law for towns like Harmony Creek, fighting the J. Roths of the world who prey on small businesses. I could use my knowledge for good, Zoe. I could be the defense lawyer for the decent, hard-working people. I could finally have a purpose that aligns with my conscience." He turned to face her, his hands cupping her cheeks. "And it looks like you. And Lily. I want to wake up every morning to the smell of your pancakes, the sound of her laughter, and the peace of knowing I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I don't need Aspen, Zoe. I need your hearth." Zoe's eyes shimmered. "That sounds like a beautiful plan, Luke. But you have to know, this isn't easy. It's hard work, cold winters, and we're all a little eccentric." "Good," Luke said, his voice deep with conviction. "I'm ready for hard work. I'm ready for real winters, and I'm quite certain I'm an eccentric now too. I choose chaos, cinnamon, and courage over control, cold, and corporate conformity." He lowered his head and kissed her, a long, tender kiss that sealed his commitment to her, to Lily, and to the small, perfect world they had created. It was the kiss of true love, forged in the heart of a blizzard. A few weeks later, after the roads had finally cleared and Luke had finalized his resignation with a surprisingly brief and professionally worded email, he was ready to begin his new life. He had purchased a charming, slightly run-down cottage on the edge of town, determined to renovate it himself, learning as he went. He was back on the B&B porch, preparing to leave after having dinner with Zoe and Lily. "So, counselor," Zoe teased, standing in the doorway, the light from the parlor spilling onto the freshly cleared steps. "Do you have everything you need for your first night in your new home?" Luke smiled, patting the pocket of his thick, new wool coat. "I have my phone, which is useless, my legal pad, which is dedicated to pro bono cases, and the deed to the cottage, which is my new challenge." He pulled her close, his eyes alight with happiness. "But I don't have the key to my true home yet." Zoe laughed, a bright, clear sound that always made his heart lift. She reached up and kissed him softly. That key isn't brass, Luke. It's commitment, honesty, and a willingness to brave the next blizzard, whether it's snow or a rogue commercial developer. She gave him a gentle push toward the path. Go on, Luke. Go make your new home warm. And remember, dinner is at 7 sharp tomorrow. Bring your shovel. We still need to clear a path to Mrs. Gable's rhododendron bush, just in case that gnome tries to move. Luke grinned, a genuine, joyful expression that completely erased the high-powered stress of his former life. He gave her a final, loving look, then turned and began to walk down the path. He didn't walk toward an elite future. He walked toward a small, honest life. He walked toward peace. He walked toward Harmony Creek, the town where he had been trapped by a snowdrift and freed by a sweetheart, and where he finally knew the immeasurable value of a life well lived. He adjusted the fuzzy blue slippers he had insisted on keeping and stepped into his future, ready to build a new legacy, one courageous, loving day at a time. The high-powered defense lawyer had found his true life, and it was beautiful, courageous, and utterly, profoundly in love.
And that brings us to the heartwarming close of Luke and Zoe's story in Harmony Creek. Thank you so much for watching Luke's journey from corporate pressure to quiet, genuine purpose. I truly appreciate you spending your time with me. If this story resonated with you, the best way to support the channel is to simply click subscribe, leave a comment letting me know your favorite part, tap like, and share this video with someone who needs a feel-good escape. Until the next tale, take care.